to Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, what we do is welcome our guests, and I believe these are the men and women that I considered the sages of today, our modern day sages. And they have gone through the fire and they have been formed through the fire to become beautified in the darkness, because I believe that's where we really truly tap into our creative power. If everything is going fine, we don't do nothing. But once it gets a little dark, that's when we start digging deep, finding out who we are and creating our world. Roger, I want to thank you for coming to Threads of Enlightenment, man. Introduce yourself to the family and tell us what you have created today.
Well, Ken, thank you so much for having me here. It's definitely a pleasure and an honor to be a part of this community and being
Thank you,
able
sir.
to share what I'm doing. It's definitely something that I find for myself is extremely worthy, and I hope others can see that for themselves as well. So I have recently created in the past couple of months a new podcast. There's like the world needed another podcast, and I do think that they need this podcast.
Yeah.
It's called the Crossing It Off podcast, and basically the show is interviewing one individual each week, where we talk about something that they've crossed off their bucket or life goal list. I know there's
Mm-hmm.
lots of different people that talk about or say that, I don't want to focus on my death. I want to focus on my life. So for me, it doesn't matter what you call the list. What it boils down to is, are you living with intention? Are you choosing
Yes.
to say, here's things that I've seen or that I enjoy and that I want to do and I want to pursue. And are you living out those things on a regular basis and with intention? And so that's what the show's about. It also is hopefully can become somewhat of a resource that if somebody says, hey, I also want to learn to tap dance over the age of 60, that they can come listen to the person that I interviewed who did that, as well as look at the show notes and find resources that can help them cross that thing off too. So yeah, that's what we created and we're pursuing. It is a podcast world. There's 2.7 million of them out there, so they say.
Yeah.
But I think this is a niche that folks, they don't have to come and listen to every episode, but if there's an episode that might tickle their fancy, or that they say, oh, I've always wanted to do that, or I want to know more about the Camino de Santiago, or whatever it is that they have on their list, it becomes a resource for them to be able to hear that somebody else accomplished that and
Yeah.
give them their process of how they did that.
That's awesome. I like that. That's what we try to do here, is to have guests like yourself come in, tell your story, tell what you have created, so that people can see, that they can look at it as a mirror maybe and say, wait a minute, if Roger can do this,
Yes.
as you stated, I can possibly do the same, and give them that courage, that additional courage that they need to make that first step, because it always is that first step.
Oh,
And Roger,
yes.
what's always keeping us from that first step is fearfulness. We're not the unfamiliar aspect of what is going to happen. But I try to tell them, man, that's the fun part. They're looking at it
That's
wrong,
right.
Roger. I think
Yeah.
that if they understand certain principles, then those that are looking at it from a fear-based place, they're looking at it wrong. Just switch it around, and all it is, I tell them, is just a perspective. It's a shift in your perspective. And once you shift your perspective, what happens is this new world that just pops into place, that has always been there, just waiting for you to shift your perspective. And I congratulate you on the show, because I've listened to a couple of the episodes, and I think it is necessary in the space of 2.5 million podcasts. So,
Thank you. Yeah, I've tried a lot of different things on the internet to have a side income, and so many people, that's what they're doing these days. And
uh-huh.
when I came up with this idea, I called one of my close friends who's known me for a real long time, and he said, this will work. And I said,
Yeah.
why do you think it'll work? And he said, because it's you. He said,
Yeah.
this is you. You're not forcing anything. You're not, you meet people and get them to tell you your story.
Yeah.
And you're passionate about this. And so it'll work. And what success looks like, I don't know. And I'm not really too into the importance of that.
Yeah.
It's, you hear the humble brag of, well, I just hope I help some people. I'm like, that is really what I want. If one person emails me and says, hey, I've listened to this and this
Yeah.
person really impacted me, great. I absolutely, I enjoy having the conversations with people so much that if I had zero listeners, I'd be okay. If I had a million, I'd still just be okay. So.
Yeah, I know how you feel, man. To me, I love the exchange that we share amongst each other because my goal in this life is to become the best human spirit that I can possibly produce. And a lot of it, I don't have the answers to all things. And I believe that none of us do. But, Roger, I believe in conversations like this, we are there's a phrase that they say, iron sharpen iron.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the type of conversation that creates that because from your insights, I'll be like, oh, wow, I've never thought about it or looked at it that way because each conversation brings another perspective. And that is how you expand your knowledge as to who you are, your understanding of your capabilities. What can I do? What can I not do? And that to me is the most beautiful journey that anyone can embark upon. So, Roger, let me grab you and take you back a little. I want to know some backstory, man, because I know you didn't get here just by waking up one morning and go, wow, something had to happen back there. I want to go back to when I believe this is when the programming starts. When we're born, once we hit the planet, people start with us, you're beautiful, you're ugly, you're all the different things that they say to you. And individual, as we began to grow in school, in the household,
Sure.
we go to church give us another aspect, the school give us another, friends give us, parents got, so we got all this information coming from us. TV, everybody has a part in producing this individual that is called Roger Williams until Roger Williams go, wait a minute. So go back and talk to me, Roger, about this program. How was your family life like? School, stuff like that.
Yeah. I grew up in the Midwest, Indiana,
Mm-hmm.
pretty conservative family, definitely conservative politically. And then church wise, we uh, went to an Episcopalian church,
Mm-hmm.
part of the Anglican community. And so I think a lot of my programming was about self-worth and where do you find
Yeah.
that self-worth, and what I remembering back at some of the things were you need to work hard to find your self-worth, you need to stay married to find your self-worth.
Yeah.
That was one of the big ones. I remember when my uncle and aunt got divorced. My parents were not very communicative people or affectionate people,
Mm-hmm.
and they had arguments. They went up to their bedroom, they shut the door, and you could hear the muffled sounds, but you weren't really sure what was going on. They did not
Yeah.
argue in front of us. And when my uncle and aunt got divorced, it was one of the first times I remember being in the car. I was probably like 10 or 11 years old. And my parents were having a conversation in front of me, an
Yeah.
honest, open conversation. And so I knew that something big was happening. And mm, at one point, my dad said, Williamses don't get divorced.
Wow.
Williamses don't get divorced. And that stuck with me through high school and then 25 years of marriage
Mm.
before I finally got divorced. And that was very traumatic for me because I wasn't sure how. But I was always living under what's mom and dad's response going to be. Even as
Yeah.
a young adult, I was always like, what is this response going to be? How are they going to react to this? I've been tattooing on my body for 25 years. The first 4 or 5 were hidden, and then it's that first one. My mom had said one time that only truckers and trailer park people get tattoos, and so I was always living under that premise that I may do something that's going to absolutely destroy my parents, right? That I'm
Yeah.
going to break a chain of trust or whatever it was, and so I was finding my self worth most of my life through what I thought my parents expected.
Yeah.
And so I stayed married. I hid my tattoos. It was almost like being a child for a very, very long time, right?
I
You,
did the same, Roger. I did the same, man.
yeah.
I was 30 something years old, Roger, when I would say was my breakaway um, from that mentality. But I lived my entire life just like that. I was actually, I would say, I was probably about 37, somewhere around there. 35, 37, around there. I'm trying to recollect. But that was when I stepped out from under the shadows of my parents. And then what happened, what broke it was an incident with my kids. They stepped
Mm,
in, and that was the catalyst that separated us. We actually didn't talk for a little while I kind of like regroup and realize, wait a minute, for 37 years, I was living to please them regardless of what I was doing. School, I mean, everything,
yeah.
Roger. It was then I woke up and I realized, wait a minute, I was 37 years old. How old were you when you had that revelation if you can recollect when you had that revelation that you were living for them?
Oh, I think I always knew it. I think there were, I didn't, there wasn't some grand moment. I think I always
Yeah,
felt that pressure. It was
yeah, yeah,
constantly, I think definitely going through my divorce was a time where it really was
yeah,
heightened because it was like, how do I tell them that a Williams is getting a divorce?
yeah,
And my dad has been, my dad was a very good husband to my mom. He was a
yeah.
salesman traveling, and he would travel. His territory at one point included all of New England, half of New York, and half of New Jersey. And
Wow.
there would be a couple of weeks at a time when he would be gone from the house. And I used to get mad because he'd come home and
Mhm.
I'd be like, "Hey, can we go see this movie?" And he'd be like, "Oh, I saw that already." And I used to get angry at it with this because it's like, "Hey, well, why don't you save it for when you get home and we can do this
Yeah,
together?" And then, well, later on in life, I realized that he was doing that so that he wasn't going to bars and strip clubs and other
yeah.
things. He was, and here I am, a child, being angry about about the fact I don't get to see the movie, but he's an adult going out there trying to, live in this world away from his family and away from his
Yeah,
wife and all that. And so I think there's just constantly learning more about my parents, and especially my dad, has helped me in some way actually be more courageous in
yeah,
making
yeah.
that breakaway. There was a point. I have a brother and a sister, and my sister has 4 kids, and I have 3 kids. And my dad would spend a lot of time with her kids,
Mm,
and that's because he felt like her husband was kind of absentee.
yeah,
And we had a conversation one time that was pretty courageous on my part, where he was like, I want you to know that I love your kids just as much, but these kids need a father figure presence. And I got the courage to say, and I think I was probably about 35, say,
mhm,
hey, look, I love you, but there's no way as a grandparent you're going to fill those love tanks that those kids need. They
yeah,
need it from their parent, and they're going to have to figure that out. So my kids need love from their grandpa just as much, and care
yeah,
just as
yeah,
much. And that was a very hard conversation to have because
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
you don't talk back. And there was another instance where my son was about 9 or 10 years old, and we went to lunch with my dad, and I said something. I don't even remember what it was, but I said something, and my son, without missing a beat, going, "That's not right, Dad. It's this." And I said, "Oh, yeah, buddy, you're right. That is what it was." And about 2 or 3 minutes later, my dad stopped the conversation and he's like, "Noah, I want you to know that you're pretty lucky, because had your dad said that to me at your age, he would have gotten a backhand," and which I think is a little exaggeration on his part, but it just, I think it was becoming a parent and making my own choices about it, right?
Yeah.
And especially on the bonds I tried to create with my kids.
Yeah.
And my dad's upbringing was pretty hard. He,
Yeah.
he was middle class and suburban, but he had an older brother who, from my dad's point of view, got everything. His older
Hmm.
brother got a car. My dad had to work and pay for his own first car. His older brother got uh, college paid for. He had to pay for college and wound up not finishing. And his parents were not very affectionate. And so,
Yeah.
and loving, and sometimes not even kind. And so I think it was really, and there weren't a lot of bonds created between he and
Hmm.
his parents. And so I think he attempted that with me, even when he was a salesman. Sometimes he would be like, "Hey, I'm going for to wake me up in the morning before school and say, 'Hey, I'm going for 2 or 3 days. You want to go with me and miss school?'" Well, yeah, I want to
Yeah. Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to ride around in the car with you and not go to school. That'd be great. So, he attempted that. He was somewhat of a professional wrestling fan
Hmm.
at a young age, and when he realized that I was watching professional wrestling, that became kind of a bond, and it's
Yeah.
actually a bond that I share with my son now. But it was different. Like, we didn't go to shows and we didn't, talk about it all the time. But when we were distant, when I lived in California and they were still living in Indiana, uh, the first part of the phone calls that we would make were that bond of, "Did you watch this show, or did you watch that, or did you see this
Yeah.
person do
Yeah.
this?" Whereas I always kind of took those things, those small bits and pieces that I was able to get, and tried to magnify them
Yeah. Yeah.
myself. And so my son and I have taken multiple road trips to see multiple shows on the weekend,
Yeah.
and something that we talk about. And I'm glad that we have that bond, because we don't always need it anymore.
Yeah.
We're able,
I did the same thing with my kids. I wanted to have that relationship with my children because I have five boys. I wanted
mm,
to have the relationship that with them that I always wanted with my father,
yeah,
and so I purposely lived that way with them. Um, we did everything together. We went camping. I remember I would tell them we went camping with just the tent and the knife and like a fishing rod thing. And I told them we're going to learn how to fend for ourselves,
there you
get
go.
food and stuff like that. So we went and we did all kinds of stuff like that. We traveled a lot together because I wanted that bond there,
Mm,
especially going through the divorce. Roger, talk to me since you are a Williams and you got this divorce. How did that make you feel? Because after hearing that at such a young age that Williams don't get divorced and you
mm,
govern your life with this, that information once you heard it, when when you're going through yours, first of all, how did it make you feel? And second, how did your parents react to it?
yeah. So, when I got divorced, everyone always asks you, "Oh, how long have you been divorced?" And
Uh-huh.
I used to say, legally or emotionally, um, because I think there is that sense that when you're done.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
mine was probably done 15 to 10 years before I actually filed.
Wow.
And so it was that there was just that constant pressure of, you figure it out, you work it out,
Yeah.
you stay in it. And I was lucky enough that when I finally decided to file and move on, I can't. I think it was Easter or my sister and my grandma's birthday, but everybody was at the house, and um, the younger generation left, and the older folks were hanging out, and my sister was there. my mom and dad and some other people. And I just said, well, I need to tell you all something that I'm getting a divorce.
Hmm.
And there's a ton of freedom with that.
Yeah.
And the conversation went well.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, I don't think my mom ever really liked her or thought that anybody would be good enough for me. So I
Yeah.
think my mom was somewhat relieved. But it was a couple weeks later that I was having a conversation with my dad, and he said, "I just want you to know that I could see it." I said, "See what?" I said, "He goes, I could see that you were back. I could see that the
Yeah.
person that I know you as was back," and that was really comforting to me to be able
Wow.
to
Yeah.
know that I hadn't let him down. Was it the best situation in the world? No. Was it going to be perfect? Was it going to be easy? No. But he recognized that I was the person that he liked when I was younger, and that
Wow.
the anger that I had been expressing and the sadness that I had been living in was gone, and that for him that was a good thing that I was back
Yeah.
to be who I
Yeah.
am, and that really gave me permission for myself. I gave my permission for myself in that to say, okay, I'm going to do what makes me happy. And part of the divorce was that I just didn't love myself. I didn't know how
Yeah.
to love myself, and my partner wasn't helping that process. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so it really was a time where I said, okay, I'm going to start loving myself and take care of myself and doing the things that make me happy. And so I think that he could see that prevalent enough that he was able to say, all right, it's okay for Williams to get divorced now. So,
Well, that's good, man. I mean, I'm sure that gave you the confidence. But you said something that I've
mm-hmm,
noticed within our society, within the programming that they program us.
mm-hmm,
They program us to get married, Roger, but they never program us to get to know ourselves, that get to love ourselves.
mm-hmm,
Because I think if we had a society that focused on that first, I think the amount of marriages that go into divorce and breakup would be minuscule compared to what it is today. Because, in all honesty, we're getting into a relationship and we don't even know who we are.
right.
Um, and I did
Especially
the same.
Yeah, especially at 20, right? I got married when I
Yeah, I
was
was
20.
23.
Yeah.
I don't know who I
That's
was.
right.
I mean, so we have this thing within a society that is programming us to get married, and again, it comes from that union with church and stuff like that. That they believe that once we get married, that this beautiful thing is going to happen, and not knowing that two imperfect people that don't
Mm.
know who they are is going to create some sparks that is going to be marvelous for children to hear, and the neighbors and everybody else as well. So I think it's a flaw within our society as a whole that we've never focused on that. And my hope, I don't know how we're going to do it, but again, it does fall upon parents that are in that programming as we become awake, that we can now educate our children as to that. And that's one of the things that I did with my children. I what was happening with me, Roger, was I was going through my growing up phase while they were young men. So every time I learned something, I would turn to them and say, "Hey guys, this is what I'm learning. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't be a martyr. Get to
Yep.
know who you are." All the lessons that I was learning in my 30s, I was depositing in these guys when they were at 12 years and teenagers and 10 and 9 and stuff like that, because I was learning it and being aware of it. So it was really interesting to watch. And so people would tell me that my kids are so much more mature than what that age group is
Mm.
supposed to be, and I wanted that to be um, I, because they need to know that. I didn't know anything like that. I was just drifting, like you said. I didn't know who I am, and I believe that knowing who we are is one of the most important journey that
Hmm.
everyone on this planet must embark upon in order to understand who they are. People that die, Roger, with not even knowing who they are, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's about for me. It's very very similar. It's all about self worth. Where do you find your
Yeah,
self worth? And I
yeah,
think that we, as a society, we especially one of the reasons for the great resignation is I think people are deciding what their own self worth is and not allowing
yeah,
it to be dictated to them by a job or society as a whole, or they're searching out where do I find my self worth. And when you're, I've held ministry positions and I've been a teacher, and I, from that aspect, I know so many miserable youth pastors. I know so many people that are miserable teachers, and not because
yeah,
they're not good teachers, or not because they're not good youth pastors, or not because they're good nurses, but there's such an expectation that your self worth is linked to your employment
yes,
in our society,
yes,
and I
yes,
think that's really what caused me to wake up. I had a heart attack in December of 2020. We've been sitting through quarantine, and everyone's asking all these questions of themselves and has the time to do so. And for me, it was like, where do I find my self worth and what do I want to be known by?
yeah,
And when it came down to it, I didn't want to, I was a teacher and I was a decent one. I had made mistakes like everybody else, but I was a good teacher. And I just felt like this expectation that that should be enough for you, right?
hmm,
You're a pastor. That should be enough for you because you get to help all these people and you get to impact people's lives. And I that was all nice and good, but if just only find my fulfillment in that, I just got sad a lot of times. I After the heart attack, I decided that I was going to just do things that made me happy and start crossing off this bucket list that I'd had forever and ever and ever. And I did the Camino de Santiago. Are you familiar with it?
yeah, hmm,
Yeah, it's a 790-mile or 790-kilometer trek across northern Spain. And
yeah,
when I got back from that, I had made a reel on Instagram that was basically just a bunch of selfies that I had taken with people that I had met for the first time on
hmm,
this journey. And I showed it to someone that I had worked with for almost 4.5, 5 years. And after she got done looking, watching it, she said, I've never seen you that happy.
wow,
And I was like, I don't want anyone to ever meet Roger and not see him that happy. And
yeah.
that's really what the explosion was inside of me, to say, okay, I've got to do something different. I've got to reset in some form or fashion. And that's what I've tried to do over the last 6, 7 months.
And I'm listening to you, Roger. We have so many similarities within our journey. Um, Mine, I started the podcast. I think after I came close to dying.
Mm,
I was in a hospital ICU for for about a week or so, and the doctor told me that I came close. Actually, they were doing a surgery on me, and she walks in and she said to me, she starts reading my chart.
mm.
Until then, I didn't know
What was?
what was going on because they were moving so fast,
Mm-hmm.
doing all the different things. And she looked at me. She said, "Oh, man," she said, "we are still trying to get you to stabilize you. You came close to dying." And she starts to read off all the things that was wrong with me. And I am familiar with it because my business and my profession, I worked within the healthcare. So I knew as she was rattling off all these things that my body was going through. That was the very first time that I realized how close I came.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember laying in the ICU for several days, and after I got to a point where I'm able to make sense of where I was and what was going on, that I start to evaluate my life and looking at it. And it was shortly after that that I started the podcast because I felt this was, as you said, one of the bucket lists that I wanted to do because I'd written a book called Threads of Enlightenment, and the purpose of the book was the same. I grabbed
Mm.
someone from a different religion, me from Christianity, a Hindu, and I told her, I said, let's write a book. I'm going to write the chapters, the title, I'm going to give it to you. I'm not going to look at yours. I don't want you to look at mine. What we're going to do is after you have written your chapter, your stuff according to the chapter. We're going to just put them together. And the purpose of it, Rogers, was to show people it doesn't matter what religion you're from. The principles of personal development are the same.
Hmm.
I don't care what religion you're from, what belief system that you were brought up in. The process is the same. You got to learn how to love yourself. If you don't know how to love yourself, how in the world, Roger, you going to love me, man?
Nope, no
Because
way.
if you can accept all your stuff, because you're the one that knows all the darkness, if you can still love yourself with that, me doing something stupid is not going to hurt you or offend you to the point where it drives you nuts. You're going to look and you've learned empathy. You've learned
Hmm.
who you are. And so you're going to look at me and go, you will pinpoint the space that I'm at and the location at my personal growth based on how I respond to you. And you're able now to allow me the space to be an idiot in my growth process. And
Hmm.
so we're not hating each other. We're just looking at each other going, wow, and then we move from there, man.
Yeah, I drive my partner crazy sometimes because she'll say something and I'll be like, okay, did I say that? You know, or is that something
Yeah.
you made up in your head? And she's like, oh yeah, it's something I made up in my head. I was like, okay, I just want to check if it's if it's me, I'll own it. But if it's not me,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna own it, and I'm not gonna feed you your stuff, and I'm not I love you, but it's you got there's something there you got to deal with, but it's not mine.
Yeah.
And I think, and that's a process of loving yourself, saying not everything everybody
Yes.
else's stuff is mine. I don't have to take on other people's stuff. I don't have to.
Exactly.
I love her. I want the best for her, but it's like there's times when I'm just like, you know what? I think that's yours. So I'm going to leave
Yeah.
that to you to deal with, unless you ask for help directly about it. But I think that it's a process of loving yourself enough to not get resentful, because I think
Mhm.
resentment is like one of the biggest killers in relationships, and
Yeah.
um, I think that understanding what is yours and what isn't yours is helpful to not become resenting of your partner or friends or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I have two
I agree.
friends that I've had for 35 plus years who are both very conservative. I am extremely liberal, and none of that matters.
Yeah.
We don't get when somebody says something stupid on either
Hmm.
side. We don't
Yeah.
get upset or angry. It's just okay. That's your stuff. You're dealing with that, and that's okay. And the love that we've shared and the times that we've helped each other and been there for each other far outweigh um,
Yeah.
those times that we don't agree on this little thing or that thing that in the long run don't matter. And I think
Yeah.
that's my hope for the world right now, is that figure we relearn compromise,
Yeah.
and not in a sacrificial giving up kind of way, but that we just relearn how to compromise with one another. I think it's so lost in just about everything that we do.
Yes, it's one of the saddest things that I ever saw, commentary I ever saw in the political sphere was when John Boehner had said, we don't, compromising is evil. And it's not, I thought that's how the American system, political system was designed for that, for the art of compromises,
Oh
for
yeah.
one mind to sit
Oh
down with
yes.
another mind and present their case and have this dance amongst each other,
Yep.
and yet come to this space of compromise, that beautiful place, that sweet spot, as they say, where we look at each other and go, yeah, I didn't get everything, but okay, I'm okay. You have
Yeah.
a, that is a beautiful place to be. And I think
Oh
it was
yeah.
a terrible, it was egregious to say something like that,
Mm.
because when you say that, you have already you've lost, you've killed the art of what our system was designed for. Roger, I want to talk to you about some of those, and again, I need to find a better word for this. Some of those monsters that we have created in our mind.
Hmm.
I'm going to date myself a little, Roger. We plug in that reel to reel in our thoughts, and we magnify this reel to reel about whatever it is, unworthiness, whatever that other things are that we have magnified so much that it becomes a reality to us, but it is a thought that we have fed over the years. Talk to me about some of those thoughts that you fed that became monsters that you had to then again, because we got to go back and face them
Hmm.
because we created them. Talk to me about some of that encounter and how did you overcome those magnified thoughts in your life?
Yeah, the one that sticks out the most is a story from right after the tsunami hit Thailand, and
Mm-hmm.
I'd gone with four friends a couple months afterwards to do some relief work to help out, do some cleanup, different kinds of things for a week, and then a year later, I went back with my then wife as more of a tourist to give our dollars
Mm-hmm.
put our dollars back into the economy, which was just as needed as the cleanup. And we visited a temple that was had a what they call the foot of Buddha, which
Mm-hmm.
is this imprint on top of this hill, this mountain that is just it looks like a footprint, and they call it the footprint of Buddha. And to get there, you have to climb like 1,200 steps, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not even it's not a hike. It's like almost walking up a ladder, right? I mean, it is so steep and in such an incline. And we were like, oh, we can do this, and this will be fun, and it'll be neat to see this at the top of the mountain and those kind of things. And my partner got about halfway up, and she was like, no, I can't do it. I'm gonna go back down. I'm like, well, I'm gonna get this. And so I think I got another 300 steps, and
Mm-hmm.
my legs were shaking. They were just like
Mm-hmm.
jello, and I was out of breath, and it was just completely out of shape, and not prepared for to be doing this activity whatsoever.
Yeah.
I was supposed to be laying on the beach, and so I had to turn around. I didn't make it to the
Mm-hmm.
top. And I got down and I quietly told myself, I said, I'm never going to take on anything like that again unless I can complete it.
Mm.
And that sounds amazing and great, except the problem that happened is that monster that creeped up was like, oh, well, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
It actually, that me telling me myself that actually froze me. It petrified me that for 14, 15 years, I didn't do anything
Wow.
because I was so
Wow.
afraid of um, disappointing myself again that I was just like,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh, that'd be fun, but I'm not going to do it. Like walking the Camino was something that had been a dream of mine for about 10 or 11 years before I did it. And it was that, and I think that that's when I experienced that cardiac event and we'd gone through quarantine. I'm like, I'm not going to let myself say no anymore. I'm not going to be fearful of not completing it. I'm going to make a plan and I'm going to execute it to the best of my ability. And it's going to be whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm gonna if I say I'm gonna if I want to do something, I'm gonna do it. And really, the Camino was that experience for me because I needed that big hurdle to jump. That first
Yeah.
that first after that
Yeah.
first turn, I needed something, needed some big hairy audacious goal that was going to make everything else kind of look simple. And it wasn't easy. I
Yeah.
bought my plane ticket in the middle of a pandemic, um, 10 months before the trip was planned, and
Mm-hmm.
and every day I'd wake up and go, okay, what are the conditions today? Is Spain open for travel? Can I get there? Are there going to be hostels open for me to stay in? Are restaurants going to be open? What kind of paperwork am I going to need to present? Do I need to get some super green card, pass that says that I'm okay with the pandemic and the virus, but after I woke up and would say those things, I'd be like, nope, doesn't matter. I'm going to go,
Yeah.
and what it is going to be. And actually, the experience was the same way. I early
Yeah.
on, in like day two, twisted my knee,
Wow.
and it was pretty bad. But I, got into Pamplona, Spain, and bought an e-brace and said, okay, I'm just going to trudge through. I got some pretty bad tendonitis midway through.
Hmm.
And so I didn't walk some. I actually took cabs some days to make it to the
Yeah,
next location. And it is what it is. I don't regret not having walked all 790 kilometers. I don't feel
yeah,
like
yeah.
I didn't complete the walk.
Hmm.
I whatever came my way, I took it and I moved forward and I finished my walk. And whether it
Yeah,
looked like everybody else's doesn't matter or not.
yeah. One of the things that I've noticed in life recently, and I've known some of it, Roger, but I'm noticing it more now within the last couple of months that each individual, and I call it a statement of faith. That statement of faith guides us. Like you made a statement of faith that said, "Yeah, I'm going to do this walk. I got to do something big." And that statement of faith, I believe, it comes to either number one, globally, where we use that statement of faith to get our profession, to be guided by our profession,
Mm-hmm.
or to do what we want to do in life. Like you made your statement of faith after you got out, just like I did after we were in crisis because of our health. You're like, wait a minute, no. And we declare a statement of faith. And that statement of faith, Roger, helps us guide our life. And I believe a lot of people are walking around without that statement of faith, that thing that will push them when they're broken, when you are at a place where you can't do anything. You may not be able to walk it, but the statement of faith, I'm going to finish this thing, even if you had to take a car, as you said, or something. But there's something else that caused you to move, and that statement that I believe people are lacking that. And I
Mm.
believe in my heart of hearts, Roger, we mentioned a little of it in the beginning of the show, that I believe this onset of COVID is giving the people in the masses the opportunity to make that statement of faith. This is not what I want. With
Mm.
their looking at their current job, their profession, or whatever it is, you made yours, I made mine. It, I believe this thing was given here to make us to reevaluate our life, to create that statement of faith within our life. And then I usually use the example of God when He comes and He's according to our Christian faith. He looks at the earth and there's darkness on it. Creation first is darkness, man. It's not
Mm-hmm.
all this fancy stuff. And He began to make some statement of faith. He says, "I need light. Let there be." Let there be. He began to make this statement of faith because what? He made one before that. He said, "Let us make man in our image." That was his global statement of faith. And so now he has to initiate things in order to put this man that he said, "Let
Mm-hmm.
us make man." You got to find a place for him to live. You got to give him food. You got to give him all this stuff. We got to get him a body to house him. And I believe, man, this is our opportunity to become those people that are now declaring our statement of faith, what we want from our life. And I believe because of this onset with this war, as I mentioned to you earlier,
Yeah.
now this statement of faith is also being given an opportunity for countries and nations and leaders to begin this newness that we are in the midst of. We don't know what it's going to look like at the end of it, but I think it's given mankind, nations, an opportunity to declare their statement of faith.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think that ultimately that statement would be, and I'm sure to some this might sound selfish, but I'm only going to do things that make me happy. Like
Yeah.
that's the lens that I'm attempting to use now, regardless of what it is, whether it's my
Mm-hmm.
relationships, whether it's my professional life, whether it's my recreational life. I'm only going to do things that make me happy. I was talking to another person on a podcast the other day, and they said, well, a lot of my listeners would probably be really interested to understand why you took out tens of thousands of dollars out of your retirement fund. They may not think that's very smart. And I'm like, because it makes me happy. It makes me
Yeah.
happy traveling. It makes me happy being able to see my friends all around the world. It makes me happy. So it makes me happy to take that money out of the stock market and do something with
Yeah.
it. And it's just so often, like you said, we get in these traumatic states of always worrying what society might think about
Yeah.
who we are or how we live our lives. And for me, it's just, and it's not, there have been times when my partner's like, "Hey, I want to go visit my family." And I'm like, "I'm not sure that's going to make me happy right now." Some days I
Yeah.
can handle
Yeah.
it. Some days I can't, but I'm not going to be at my best. I know
Yeah.
I'm not going to be at my best, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stay here, and next time around, we'll see where I'm at. And it sounds extremely selfish, but isn't but is that's for me, it's like that's how to live out my abundance, right? Is
Hmm.
to be in the best place I can be, not just for myself, not just for my benefit, but for the benefit of others. Um,
Others, everyone around you, Roger. I mean, when you're your best self,
yeah,
if you don't want to be in that situation, you're having a conversation with someone. The conversation is not really a pure thing. It's tainted because I don't want to be here.
yeah,
And so your substance, your reality, your trueness is not expressed. But if you want to be there, you're going to speak from a place that is different from if you don't want to be
exactly.
there. So I don't see anything wrong with it at all.
Yeah,
I see a more pure form of living than the lie that everyone has been programmed to lie.
yep,
Be here and smile and I rather be shoveling dog shit than to be here in this conversation. And so you're not fully there anyway.
yeah,
So
yeah.
isn't that horrible? That's worse.
Yeah, I look back at the last 4 or 5 years, and for some of us, it was really hard 4 or 5 years to live in the United
Yeah,
States and have the leadership that we had. And we've just become such a troll society, right? Where like
yeah,
everyone's trying to troll each other. And that was one of
yeah.
the things
That's
I would
sad,
tell my
man.
liberal friends is just like, why are you so angry? Why are you so upset
Yeah,
about this? Yeah, that might not have been the best thing to say, or, why do you give in? Right? Why do you
yeah,
give in to that anger and that hate? Because that's what other people want you to do. That's it, and
yep,
it's just bizarre to me that is a society that's where we're at. It's so much easier to troll people and make people angry than to sit and listen and have empathy, like you said before. And so
yeah.
I would tell my friends, I'm like, just stop watching the news, stop. But I
They're
can't because
programmed,
it's so
man.
important. It's so important, and I'm like, no, it's not. Your health and your sanity is not more important than knowing what
Yeah,
the craziest thing the last crazy leader said. You gotta be above that, and for yourself and for your own happiness.
yeah. One of the main forces that governs the world as a whole is fear.
Hmm.
It's what the politicians use to control the masses. It is what they use to teach us. It is what they use to do everything based on that, so that people are fearful to leave their job to move to another space in their life. They're fearful as we started the conversation, the fear of the unknown. They're fearful to try a new diet, to
Hmm.
try new. I mean, we're just fearful of everything. I mean, it is what governs them. And when we begin to unhook from that perspective, as I mentioned to you earlier, life becomes a little different. How we react, I believe we gain more control of our ability to make choices.
Hmm.
That when you begin to become more personally interested in your development, Roger, I believe that's the place where we make choices. We're making more decisions, the ability to decide. We're not, as you go ship without a rudder, just go as the wind wherever.
Right.
Um, the ability to make the choices is how we become who we are as we embark on this process of self development to become better human spirits while we're here. Roger, I want to thank you for coming to Threads of
That's,
Enlightenment. This has been, for me, I see a lot of parallel in our lives, man, because it was a traumatic situation that caused me to ask those questions, just like yours. And I can sense a kindred spirit when we both turn around and say, "I got unhooked, man."
That's right.
And
Time to reset.
I've been, I've been listening to your podcast, and I think it's awesome. And I'm going to
Thank you
become a
so much.
regular listener to it as well. Um, and I want to thank you for coming by, man, and just dropping and sitting here with us for a little while and sharing your story and giving us some insights to your progress and what you're doing on this planet while you're here for the remainder of time. Thank you so much for coming,
Well,
man.
thank you for having me, Ken. It's been a joy and a pleasure to have this conversation with you, and I appreciate what you're doing for your listeners. And I just encourage everybody to keep on listening and having conversations and being in community with one another, because that's how we're going to find that empathy you talked about, is sitting in community like this. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much, sir. Everyone who's listening to this podcast, we hope to continually help you to learn how to embrace moments of darkness, because it is in the darkness that we learn how to develop and use our abilities to truly see those parts of ourselves, often invisible to us, in the light. It becomes your responsibility to navigate through all of your trials, to find out who you truly are and begin your journey to loving yourself, which is possibly one of the most difficult things you will ever do in your life. To love yourself and to find the real you, but always remember to enjoy the journey. Thank you for coming by. Please subscribe, and if you can support us financially, we deeply appreciate it.